if Brent Venables wins the national championship at Oklahoma before Lincoln Riley wins one at USC, does that add pressure to Riley's job performance? Same with similar scenarios. Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman, Mario Cristobal and Dan Lanning, checking in from Norman, Oklahoma there. Yeah, of course it does. How can it not? So to be clear now, what the question is if Brent Venables comes into Oklahoma and wins a national championship before Lincoln Riley does, you don't need to overthink the room here. I think you know what's going to be said. I think I know what's going to be said. And you and I may even be among the people saying it. And it's the same way. Imagine Brian Kelly having been at Notre Dame for a decade. And if Marcus Freeman comes in and he wins a national championship, which is what Brian Kelly got to the playoffs but never got really close to doing himself, yeah, I think there would be a word or two said about that. Mario Cristobal, there's a reputation about him out there right now that would only, in the minds of many, be validated if he were to load the cupboard up with elite recruits, but then leave, and then Dan Lanning comes in and actually wins the big one with those recruits. Yeah, a lot of people would say, told you he was a recruiter, but he couldn't win the big one. A lot of people at Notre Dame with Brian Kelly would say, told you he was good but not great. And a lot of people in Norman, Oklahoma would say, told you he was all flash but no substance. So yeah. Now, that's the local fan base. The ironic part about this question is nationally, this is one of those instances where the national refrain would sound the same as the zoomed-in local refrain there. Because like we've talked about many times, Lincoln Riley is a guy who moves the needle so much because everyone thinks something about him. There are very few college football fans you walk up to. You could be in Sacramento, California. You could be in Norfolk, Virginia. You walk up to someone and say, Lincoln Riley, your opinion, go. Hardly anyone saying, nah, take him or leave him. You know, I don't really care either way. That's what you say about Paul Christ at Wisconsin. You don't say that about Lincoln Riley. And so if you were to see Brent Venables, his replacement, win one before he wins one in LA, and that's a program, by the way, that he left Oklahoma for voluntarily because presumably it gives him a better shot to succeed than what he had at Oklahoma, and they win, that's a big deal. If Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame because he says, I wasn't quite getting all the resources I felt like I needed, and so I'm going to a place that gives them to me, and his replacement, who was already on his staff, by the way, in Marcus Freeman, wins before he does at LSU, yeah, that's a really big deal. You could, of course, say the same thing if you're an Oregon Duck fan and your guy Mario Cristobal leaves you to go home, and he talks about how, I don't really think there's been a comparative analysis as much on this part. I have not heard Mario Cristobal talk about how Miami compares to Oregon, but yet you can fill in the blank. You don't leave unless you think it's a better situation. So in all three of those cases, Oregon included, if your guy leaves you and his replacement wins one before he does at his presumed better location than yours was, yeah, it's a really big deal.